this should be a pretty fun one. So I've confirmed the size of this punch, as you can see right here. The balance looks about right. I'll throw the picture up of the original. And I've settled on about the size of one of these last three triangles here. It's about 14 millimeters wide. I need to make a punch for that. And this is a central blank space on this ridge. This is the overall shape of the ring. It's a very thin ring. Still a really cool piece and a really cool project. I did have to get this. I think this will help with forming that central ridge. It might get a bit tricky. Overall, it's a really simple shape, but achieving this, like I said, could be tricky. It's easier to stretch things out, stretch metal, rather than bottleneck it like this. So using this like a raising stake, we'll see the results I get. So let's talk for a minute about sinking and raising, the difference between the two. This would be an example of sinking or dishing. You lay metal over a thing, you hammer down, and the metal is stretched into the form. Raising, you are trying to preserve the thickness of the metal and achieve a form, which with a different shape, you could still end up with that shape. Really, it's just, take one of these, drop it in, and hammer over it in a specific way. It's more work, but sometimes it pays off. So like I said, with this, you hammer, metal is laying here, and then get squished down. This one, you lay the metal on top, and you don't pinch it between your form like you would here. You have your dapping punch, that round thing I just pulled out a second ago. You're pinching the metal between these things, and that's causing stretching. This one, you're laying your metal on top, and you're hammering into the void. Which you might say, well, how's that any better? Because you're still hammering it down into a divot like that. How is that stretching it less? Basically, you're not bridging the gap like this. So, take old Bullwinkle here. If you're doing a larger bracelet, you have your strip of stock. You're going to turn that into a bracelet or whatever. Oh, goodness, where is something here? We're not bridging the gap. We're not doing this and hammering in the middle. We're doing this and forming around. The other big difference that makes a big difference. A quick rummage through the old scrap steel bucket. We've got metal shavings, we've got dust pockets from door work, we have straps from pallets, all stuff that someday, well, mostly all stuff that someday I hope to melt down and make my own steel out of, but that's a good one right there. That's useful. Ooh. That's probably something reasonably hardened as well. Chuck that guy in. We don't need that. We got these. Very good. I could just go buy a drill rod, but where would the fun be in that? Some decent materials right there. Okay, that's plenty. We're good. We'll dump this back in. It's... And here we encounter our first hurdle. A grinder with no station. Unfortunate. Alright, put on your glasses. Oh yeah. Yes, there we go. Here's triangle. There's our triangle. Looking good. Nope. Oh, it's running away. No. Why is this so difficult? Eventually I should invest in a actual lens. But for now, we're stuck doing this. There we go. So, it's not perfect, but it is an equilateral triangle. Pretty good. So it works pretty well. These are some really heavy deformations there. You can see the backside has really been affected. And then that one right there is lighter, but it's fairly crisp, especially once that gets some liver sulfur in there to blacken it. That's a nice crisp wall to it. It shouldn't polish away right away, but I'm going to take a polished hammer and hit this from the back side to pop that back out and see how these end up. It's looking pretty good. That's promising. I like it. There were some marks on the surface, and marks were being left behind in my stampings here. You can see them as diagonal lines in the triangle right there. See the pattern? Same diagonal lines in all of them. So I took a closer look at this, and I did take some sandpaper and I scrubbed it. Just figure eights, change a face, figure eights, change the face, figure eights. And yeah, you can see it cleared that right up. Much cleaner. I mean, they're still faintly there, but the marks should be so subtle now. And probably a little bit of tooth inside there would be good for the liver of sulfur. Alright, let's fire up the torch and get these things connected. Make this into a ring and straighten it out after that. So what I think is going to happen is I think I'm going to end up with a size smaller than I intended, which would mean I'll have to remake this a size larger to account for bottlenecking these ends down. Foreseeable, I suppose, but we'll see how it really turns out. The size is currently 11 1/4. We're going to see if we can pull this off. I'm thinking the best way to go about this might be starting from the outside edge and working in. Take the small bites, make a pass, make a pass, make a pass. Flip it, make a pass, make a pass, make a pass. And between every pass, anneal it. If this was fine silver instead of sterling, you could get away with more passes because it stays softer longer. But this is sterling, so we're going to anneal after every pass to avoid cracking. The biggest worry would be this seam coming undone from work hardening, and just it would be nasty if that happened. Gotta be careful. Alright, got the vise rotated. This is all nice and well supported in the jaws. Time to grab the hammer and see how this goes. Fingers crossed. The really big downside on a ring like this, it's just so thin and heavily hammered and worked. Markings on the inside are effectively worthless. I mean, they are barely persisting in there. Like, those are going to polish away, I don't know, depending on how aggressive of a polisher you are, a handful of years or so. I wouldn't know really for sure, but they're just barely hanging on. I think it holds up just fine as a finger ring, although maybe as a ring for hair or something, that could be, I could see that too. I wouldn't understand this being used as a pendant. I could see it also as decoration on a case. Sewn onto clothing doesn't feel likely to me, but this is 20 gauge. I don't remember what that is in millimeters. So that's American wire gauge, but it looks pretty close to the original as far as like what the thickness could have been roughly. I guess the original 22 gauge, somewhere in there. But honestly, I mean, it's wide enough. It feels pretty good as a ring. It's comfy, which is surprising because it's so wide. Like, this is a little over a half-inch wide, which the measurement listed is 14 millimeters. I forget what they call it. I would say width, but I think they said height, which they listed the diameter. So, you know, diameter is whatever size. So height must mean width. The width of the band. But yeah, it's surprisingly comfy for a wide band like this. I don't know, probably in part due to that flared shape. It's also not perfectly round. You can see a little lump there. And again, size 9 1/4 US. Let's drop it on this side. This ring finger is size 9 1/4. My dominant hand, my right hand, is 9 1/2, and it goes on either very easily. But then again, it is pretty cold down here, so probably would fit a little worse on the right hand in hot weather conditions for a 9 1/2. But then again, like I said, the contact points are really only right on these edges because the rest of this is flared up and out. So it's pretty easy to put on and remove, to be honest. And one more, since I'm pretty sure we're all tired of looking at this in my hands by now. But you can kind of see there, that is set for 14 millimeters. And we are that much wider. So 14 is what's listed as the measurement on the original. I don't know how accurate that is. We'll flip this to inches. There we go. 0.5, and you already saw what that's like, so yeah, that's roughly where it stands. Okay, so on the first go, I cut this strip out as a 14 millimeter wide strip. After forming now, measuring, at its widest point, it is 15.15 millimeters. At the narrower points, measuring the width, 15. So there's a little 0.15 variance in the width. No biggie. I cut this out as size 11, and it's size, what did I say, 9 1/4. So I am going to measure out for size 12 3/4 to accommodate for the shrinkage from shaping. And I'm going to cut the width of the strip out about 13.5 millimeters to accommodate for the stretching from shaping. So shaping is stretching it a little bit wider, and it's reducing the size a bit. Ladies and gentlemen, we've done it. So these little carbide bits, burrs rather, wow, don't even have my own nomenclature correct. Not the most expensive, but they're also not exactly cheap either. These aren't perfectly true spinning, which, I mean, they're itty bitty little things, so how true can you expect them to spin? So, also, I guess it could be this as well. Maybe these are true, and maybe it's the way this thing rotates. I don't know. Something's off though, because when you chuck it up in there and you get under the glasses and you're going to take the burr and drill out the tip on this thing, noticeable wobble. So you'll take this, you'll brace it against something, you'll brace the bit against your thumb so it's spinning on that to help steady it, because when you go to touch down, you're seeing that the bit's doing a little hoppy thing. It's like, oh no, we don't have any, can't really take the center punch and punch the middle of this. One, because that's really tiny to try to do that. It's probably not going to turn out centered. And two, this is also tool steel, so you've got to establish your mark with your burr that's rotating and hopping around because it's not perfectly true for whatever reason, whether that's the bit or the handpiece again. So yeah, it's pretty close though. You can see it's not perfect. We'll get a better close-up. All things considered, not too shabby, having been done with a slightly wonky bit. Or burr, rather. It's not perfectly centered, although some of that is the way this light is being screwed with these lenses. You can kind of sort of figure out how much of it is the light being manipulated and how much of it is how off-center it is. It's not off-center by too much, actually. I'm pretty happy with that. So here's how it shows up on the silver, which I think is pretty good. It looks pretty close in size to the original, so I'm pretty happy with that. So let's cut out the band and do this thing. We have the tools now. Closer and closer, slowly, bit by bit. Also, where did that go? Oh yeah, right there. Nice. Can't believe that's holding up.
trust the process.